Today, we are going to talk about what is CloudWatch, how exactly it functions, and what are the real-time use cases which is mapped to the CloudWatch in today's video. Without wasting time, let's go for it. To navigate to the CloudWatch, you can go for the UI and search with the keyword CloudWatch. It's going to take you to the CloudWatch service itself. And this is where all the logs which are natively published by AWS gets pushed, and all these logs been categorized into a separate groups called as log groups. So this is to identify what service or what resource is pushing you the resource. For example, if you have an S3 bucket ABC, then if it's pushing a log to the backend AWS which you want to use for any metrics, then where it gets stored. So it would be get stored as an individual log groups. If the log group's name starts with /AWS/Lambda, then you can see it's the AWS native log groups for a service Lambda with the name of the Lambda is going to be the log group name itself. And if you go deep into any of the log groups, you would see something called as log streams. So log streams is nothing but the logs which are being published to the log groups itself. And in generically, the log groups might be, it's in a JSON format and it would contain a timestamp and more relevant information what exactly about the services. For instance, if you're talking about CloudFront, the CDN of AWS, then it can give you details like how many 4xx errors, how many 5xx errors for the specific distribution, so that we can set up a monitoring from those logs and to set the required information as we need it. It can be also used to measure the performance, how the distribution is performing, and any latency from the distribution to the origin. Likewise, if you're talking about EC2, what is the CPU utilization you're facing? Is there any need of auto scaling, or is it low performing, or like are we allocating more resource which we want to scale it down for cost cutting? So those kind of insights we can get with the help of this log groups and log events. So log events is periodic data which is passed to the log groups, and log groups is something the place where to store all those log groups individually. Okay, so now we got the clarity like what log groups is, what the log streams is meant for, and how to get the visualize. Because if I go here and see there is some log stream is there, and it's consists of a cumulative of like a number of things, but in production world you won't see single log stream. You would be getting bombarded with like a number of log streams, and how we can visualize like for the specific data which we are looking for. So that's where the dashboards and the other metrics filtering options comes in, which you could see under the metrics section of the UI. So if you go to the all metrics, so this consists of all the metrics which has been published to the CloudWatch. Okay, so by native, whichever AWS is offering, it consists of limited information. It won't consist of information related to your application. Let's say if you're running an Nginx inside an EC2 instance, then if you ask about any information about the Nginx, the AWS might not be aware about it. You can still publish those information to the log groups. We will reserve that topic for a separate video. If you're interested, do comment, like if you want to make a separate video for that. But then to give you an idea, you would be having something called the namespace, and then each namespace will consist of multiple metrics. Okay, so for instance, if I go for Route 53, the Route 53 is where we registered our domain and using it as a DNS service provider. And so currently under the namespace of Route 53, you have the hosted zone metrics. And if you talk about the metric name, it consists of the DNS queries. So I can see, if I click here and add it to the dashboard, I can see how many queries are being hit for my specific hosted zone. So this is one example for Route 53. So same thing you can try for different services which you are currently using on to get the visualize of the trend, what's exactly happening for the specific service or from the log group. So you get it in a dotted form as you see in the screen. Let's go for CloudFront as a secondary example, and the default metrics being published is for per distribution metrics, and then you get the distribution ID and the metric name. So the metric name is generally a category like what it does. So you can see multiple categories like total request, 5xx error rate, 4xx error rate, and so on. So let's say if I want to configure for an 5xx error rate, I can just click that specific one and I can see what I want to get visualize it for. So now we see like I'm getting some metrics over here, but this is a bit tricky. Okay, so when I added here this to the dashboard, you still see the traffic, but this graph is not of this specific 5xx one. How I'm saying, if you go to the graph metrics, you can see I can have query within the same one, and I can select which one to be viewed and which one I don't want to view it. So that option is available in the graph metric, because in browse you might not be exactly knowing, but in graph metric you can clearly see what are the things I am displaying it in the dashboard itself. So if I don't want, for example, I don't want to see the route 53, I can just remove it. If I want to keep both, I can do it. Or if I want to perform some specific action, like I need a new metric in the dashboard of adding those two, the route 53 and CloudFront, I can still do that. So those options are available under the graphed metric section. Okay. So generally you would use browse to go navigate and filter for a specific metric name. So because we might not be knowing, like, is it is lowercase or is uppercase in the 5xx error metric, right? So that would be the best way to navigate individually under the browser section. You add it to the graph metric, or if you want to add multiple combinations, let's say I don't want to show these two, but I want to do a sum of some XYZ stuff, I can do that. So I can say like average of, and then it's more of like you play with it. So metric of what? So you add the expression for like metrics of M1 plus M2 likewise, and if you apply it, then it's going to do the operations for it. So I'm not going deep into it, but you get the idea like what actually it's meant for, right? And so that's where the graph metrics would come into play. And then you also have multi-source query. So this is more like you want to group together, or if you want to like order by any kind of things, then you would choose this way. So as I say, it's a namespace metric, so you can go with route 53 as well, but now it's showing for the CloudFront because here we selected the CloudFront specific one. So if you go normal and you have multiple options, like what are the things available, and you can still filter based on what you want to do based on the metric name. And one common thing you would look for is like the action items of count or sum or average. So that's nothing but how we want to get the data visualized. For example, my CPU utilization may be like 100% at one time and 90% is the middle. But I just want to see if the average is crossing some X threshold, then I need to trigger scale up or scale down likewise. Then I can use average math functionality. That can be scenario like if the 5x axis, hitting some specific count, like number of times, then I would use options like count. If the total volume is storage some like XYZ figure, then you would go with sum of the figure. So based on the use case wise, you would choose what kind of statistics you want to perform, average, minimum, maximum. So all these tabs are still querying the backend of your log groups, your metric name, which has been getting passed. Okay, so it's irrespective of what AWS natively sending or your custom namespace. So all falls under the same console or same service of the CloudWatch log groups itself. The another one, it's the options is mainly for the how the UI should look like and what metrics, left y-axis and x-axis, those kind of configurations over here. The main added advantage is the source field. So the source field, you can get it as a JSON format so that you can copy the snippet and reuse it a number of times. When I say a number of times, if you are going with the infrastructure as code approach, let's say you want to create a log groups dashboard using the Terraform, then you would get the values from here. So you go to the browse or you go to the graph metric, you do all the configurations you need to get visualized, and then you come here and then copy the source so that you can easily replicate the alarm or recreate the dashboard itself. So now let's talk about the dashboard. So now you get the idea like how you navigate to each metrics and get the visualization over here and do the querying part. So now let's try to go for creating a dashboard. So if you go for the dashboard, I already have one for test, but let's create a new one. I'm giving it as a demo, and in the dashboard, I can create a metric. If you see, it's again asking me to go and filter the same UI which we see, like you select which filter or which namespace and which filter you select. What I can do is I can just go to the source and just copy what we have created over there. So then I can easily replicate with a fraction of seconds the same thing rather than going each time clicking and fetching the right values which I needed it. And if I create a widget, then the widget is being created. So here the widget is global, which means if I even change the region, the widget would still be there. So for example, I think I haven't saved the dashboard, my bad, but I already had one for the test one. You'll see. So you see that the dashboard still exists. It's just that I haven't stored the widget. but then let's do it. So if I save it, create widget and save this, irrespective of what region I'm in for the dashboard, I can still jump and see the data at one place. So that's one added advantage of using the CloudWatch dashboard, because it's not region specific. Whereas what is region specific is the query is region specific, because if I go for browse, you can see which metric data or which region specific you are querying. So if I go with update widget, so if it's a global service, then there is no difference on it. Like you get the consistency data. Whereas if you're EC2 is in separate region, in that case, you might need to choose what region you are querying the data for. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. But most preferably for global service like Route 53 or CloudFront, where they don't have any proper specific region, since it's like spread across the world, then you would choose North Virginia as the region of choice when creating the dashboard. Now let's also talk about creating the alarm and setting up respective actions or to get notified when certain threshold has been met. How can we do that? So same again in the CloudWatch, you have the section for all alarms and you can say create alarm. Again, you see it's going to, you want to select the metric, the similar kind of UI which we have seen, like where you navigate to the specific namespace and the specific metric name and you do it. Since we already have the JSON copied during the first time, I'm just reusing it. I'm updating it now and let's say select metric. So now it's asked what is the statistic I need to follow for setting the alarm. Should I say the sum, overall sum, or should I say overall count, or should I say the overall average? So what are minimum, maximum? So it's going to completely vary from case to case. For example, for EC2, I might be saying I need to make an average of percentage of like 50% CPU utilization. If it's crossing, then do that. Or I might be saying that if it's very critical information, then as soon as it reaches a maximum of once, like it reaches a maximum of 90% utilization, then you scale up. So it's completely going to vary based on the case to case of setting up the threshold and setting up the threshold value of what kind of statistic you are going to use. Same way, you also can determine based on the performance like P90 and those kind of metrics also been offered, which can be used for scenarios like CloudFront, where you want to know is there any latency or any performance impact for the end user. So those kind of metrics also been provided by the AWS itself, and obviously not for all the service, whichever service which is relevant, that you think the performance will be there. So now if you come down, the threshold will come into picture. So for example, here we say statistic and anomaly detection. So most preferably we will go for static one so that you can have a fixed division. Like for example, for the DNS query, since it's like a non-prod domain and there are not much hits about it, I'm having like average of like one, not even more than that. So in my case, maybe like even like 50 can be like an abnormal, and I would like to get notified if there is any DNS or like any attack comes in the picture. So your scenarios can be like vary from that. So generally you get the visualization, like what is my average trend in the graph which you're looking for, and you would set some above the bar so that you have the cap limit. If it hits it, then you detect something like abnormal or something is wrong happening for your application. That's how generally the threshold value goes for it. So in this case, I can say like, for example, 50, and I can go next. So now you have 3 conditions which you can get notified or configure an action for that. One being in alarm state, 2 OK, and insufficient. So OK state is when you have a threshold, and if the current value is under the threshold, then it's generally an OK state. You have a threshold, if it crosses it, then it's in alarm state. If there are no logs to visualize, or the log is corrupted, in those cases it would be insufficient data. So these 3 are the states for your CloudWatch log groups alarms when you configure it. So in generally, you configure for in alarm or OK, and insufficient is like very rarely occur. If it's a production uptime, then lower the chance of getting into insufficient data mode. So now you can see whether do I need to select a new SNS topic. So SNS is something like to get notified to the configured email ID. We are using it here, right? So if you're using services like PagerDuty or things like that, then you can use the email ID of the PagerDuty and configure it here so that if something alarms triggers and it gets notified the respective person who are on shift to get notified. Okay, that's one way of doing it. You can also attach the Lambda action. Maybe if you want to automate a solution, for example, the CPU utilization is reaching this state, then you want to restart the server. So those kind of things can be done either using a Lambda script and get it done. Or you can also use auto scaling action like scale up or down, or if it's a specific EC2 instance, then you can say like restart within here itself. So n number of options available for your automation to get notified, and also to perform a specific action based on the threshold which you configure. There can be also a scenario where you want to get notified once it's recovered also, because you never know, right? Like if it's recovered or not. So then if you are automating it, then you can configure 2 alarms, one for in alarm and another for OK alarm, OK state, so that you know, okay, so something went wrong and it should have recovered in like 15 minutes and then it got recovered in 15 minutes. So for a notification, you can set for in alarm and OK. And the best thing here is it won't trigger like 24/7, right? So which means only when there is a state change, then only the alarm is triggered once. For example, if the app is running fine in OK state and then it's moving to a alarm state, only once it gets triggered. Same way, when it returns back from in alarm to OK, then it will get triggered. So it's like one-time action. When there is a change in state from either from in alarm to OK or OK to in alarm or insufficient or any form from one state to another state change, then only the alarm gets triggered and get notified for you. Okay. So if I go for next, it asks for the alarm name. You can say demo or whatever it is, and you can also set the description for you so that you get when you get an email or when you get notified, it says what actually the alarm is for. And if you want to give some instruction for the on-call person, let's say some relevant documentation. Okay, for this specific alarm, do this run book so that go here and troubleshoot. So those kind of things also you can configure it here for easy troubleshooting and quick resolution for your services of AWS. So now you get the visualization, you can do a create alarm part. So the same concept you would apply for billing and everything. You just choose a right namespace, right metric name, and right threshold based on the visualization, and you do that. So this is an overall idea, like how you can use log groups, how you can navigate it, how you can filter the namespace, how can you use a source field to reuse it at a number of places, and how can you configure your first alarm. Okay, so this is one of the major projects you can see, like when it comes to like monitoring and observability at AWS. If you are interested in publishing a custom namespace to the CloudWatch log groups, do let me know. I'll make a separate video out of it. We also made several videos on AWS like CDK. If you're interested, go there and check it out. See you in the next video. Until then, tada from Vasan. Thanks.